Did baseball's infield and outfields come from medieval farming schemes? Were harrows used to avoid or enjoy a harrowing time? Why weren't there 4-field or 5-field systems? These and other questions will be answered right after this. I'm Professor Jerome Arkenberg, and I have been teaching a wide variety of history courses at colleges across this country for the past 30 years. In this video, I'm going to tell you about the infield and outfield versus the open field systems, 2-field versus 3-field rotation systems, ridge and furrow system, scratch plows versus heavy plows, the medieval harrow, and other medieval farm tools such as shovels, pitchforks, and billhooks, and farm carts versus wagons. At the end, I'll have the wrap-up quote on this video. But first, make sure to click like, share, especially subscribe, and that little bell thingy, so I can continue to bring you more great videos just like this one. Medieval village agriculture was based on simple crop rotation. Because after a while, if you farm the land long enough, the soil will lose its nutritional power to grow plants. So at first, it followed the ancient system, the Greeks and Romans, of a 2-field system, where one field would be planted and the other field would just lay there and nothing was planted on it. So it lay fallow and hopefully regain its nutritional fertility. But from the 12th century, starting in northwestern France, as we see here, a new system occurred called the 3-field system. And the 3-field would annually rotate each field between plantings of wheat or rye, then barley or oats, and then would lay fallow without crops for a year. So, for example, here we have the spring planting year, primarily barley or oats. The autumn planting, which would be wheat or rye, and this field would be left fallow, no planting that year. The next year, this part down here would be the spring planting of barley or oats. This former fallow field would then be planted with the autumn planting of wheat or rye, and this field would lay fallow. And then the next year after that would be this year field laying fallow, and so forth, just rotating back and forth. Now, there is an advantage to that, as we see here on this chart. So, this is the 2-course rotation on the Bishop's Cleeve in Gloucestershire, 1299 to 1300. This is the 3-course rotation. Now, notice the yield ratio is generally higher, yield ratio right here, generally higher in the 2-field system than the 3-field system, but the overall crop harvest, you see right here, is higher in the 3-field system than in the 2-field system. The cash from sale also much higher in the 3-course than in the 2-course rotation. And as a result of the 3-course rotation, this contributes to rising population and also rising wealth. Now, originally, only the infield, close to a village, was intensively cultivated. That'd be this part right here, while the outfield was largely left alone, in part because you don't have as many people living in the village yet, so you don't really need to put this under cultivation yet. Also, you need to be able to walk out to your field, do what you need to do in that day, and walk back at the end of night. And that's difficult for some of these to do so, which is why many of these villages are fairly close together. Now, by the 11th century, as the population began to rise, this infield-outfield system was replaced by what's called the open field system. The open field system is shown here. The open fields are made up of bundles of long, narrow strips, each peasant family holding strips, which in England is called a Virgate, Virgate, a Virgate, in each of the rotating open fields. So whenever you would come and settle permanently in the village, hopefully you'd have to get a strip, at least one Virgate, in each of the 3 fields. Because if you just got it in the field and next year that field is laying fallow, there is no food for you and you will starve and die. Now, the length of each strip was the distance a plow team, and normally the plow team, the plows, despite this picture here, the plow is normally going to be drawn by oxen. A horse is okay, but it's normally an ox. It's a distance a plow and a team can travel before being forced to turn around. Let's say they hit a hedge, or there's a stream or rivulet, a ravine, a hill, something, before you have to turn around. While the width was the amount that plow team could plow in a single day. And that thing is a Virgate. And overall, this becomes what's known as a ridge and furrow system. As you see from these aerial photos, even though the land is no longer planted, the shape remains. These are the ridges and furrows that you could see. So for example, this one, apparently the Virgate would go up to about here and stop for whatever reason, because here you have different ones going a different way. You see it really clearly here. In plowing, the sod was repeatedly turned toward the middle of the strip, forming a ridge. It would always be plowed the same way, 2 or 3 times in the fall, 2 or 3 times in the springtime, maybe 2 or 3 times in the summertime, year after year after year, after decade after decade, after generation. And eventually, of course, since it's constantly turning over the sod, it forms a ridge. This is beneficial because in a wet season, when the fields are otherwise flooded, you hopefully will be able to take a bit of a crop which is at the top of the ridge. It may not be much, but it's better than starving and dying. And then hopefully you set it up, it would be set up originally, so that the furrow runs by gravity downhill. This way, if there is surface water, excess surface water, it will be carried away from the fields. In Roman times, and in the Middle Ages around the Mediterranean, farmers, generally speaking, used a scratch plow. Why? Because the soil there is dry and naturally crumbly. So normally you don't really need anything to cut into the soil and turn it over, because it's already kind of dry on its own. So the scratch plow simply scratches or stirs the surface of the soil without turning it over and burying the weeds. And the plow is fairly light, which means it can easily be carried out to the fields and turned around without too much trouble at the end of the furrow. You see them here. This is a cultic farmer from Roman times, about the 3rd or 4th century AD. And these are some medieval forms of it. Same thing, this is technically a shear plow, but it works kind of the same way. But Northern Europe requires something different because the soil is wetter and heavier. The weeds and the grass grow further down. So the heavy plow appeared by the end of antiquity. And the heavy plow was equipped with a coulter. And the coulter is sort of a giant knife. Hopefully, if you can, you would afford, and actually the whole thing would be iron. But if not, at least the cutting edge should be iron. And this would make a vertical cut through the soil. Essentially, it's acting like a scratch plow. And then behind it comes an iron edge, usually not entirely iron because iron is too expensive to use entirely, but a share, which is what you see here, this thing. And at least the edge, the cutting edge, was edged with iron. And the idea is the soil which has been cut by the coulter will go into the share, and the share will cut deeply into the soil and turn it over and cut any weeds and grass, the roots down, and again, turn the whole thing over. And because the share is actually fairly heavy and you need to really press down, you have this long beam which is supported by two large wheels. It's kind of like a share on a wagon cart almost. Now, either case, whether it's a scratch plow or a heavy plow, the plowman or the plowwoman, usually a man, you still got to press down heavily to do it. You can't just leave it go and let the animals pull as they may. You still obviously also have to make sure the animals go in a straight line and keep going, because animals naturally don't want to walk in a straight line, and oftentimes they just want to stop, maybe munching stuff, go elsewhere. So you're there to make sure the animal goes straight, but you got to press down on the thing. The heavy plow was far more efficient at breaking up the soil and burying the weeds, but unfortunately, because it was so heavy and it's got the wheels, it's clumsy. It requires a team of 6 to 8 draft animals to pull it, less if they're horses, more if they're oxen. So it turns with difficulty. It's kind of like turning at the end of a road a large semi-trailer truck. Semi-trailer trucks are harder to turn than a pickup truck. Think of the scratch plow as kind of a pickup truck in terms of turning around, and the heavy plow in terms of turning around the semi-trailer truck. And whatever it is, the scratch plow could be used without too much trouble on a hillside. A heavy plow, not so much. You can go up and down one, but sideways, the plow had an unfortunate tendency to just tip over. Another major tool is the harrow. You see the harrow here. Talk about it in another video. The harrows is a wooden frame with crossbars. These are the crossbars. The frame could be either square, rectangular, could be triangular, or some other odd shape. And into these crossbars are fastened spikes, usually of wood, iron if you could afford it, though iron was very expensive to use for this. Sometimes weighted down with a heavy stone on it to press it into the soil, or maybe a young child to sit on it, and almost always drawn by a horse, because the latter, of course, moves quicker than oxen. Because the idea is you're not just harrowing and breaking up the clods of earth. There's a sower, S-O-W-E-R, that's this guy going behind, and he's sowing or scattering the seed. And the idea is, so the harrow goes first, breaks up the clods of earth, he scatters the seed, and then the harrow and the horse have to be turned around and go back over again. Because this way, the seed hopefully will be covered with dirt from the harrow's actions to protect it from those annoying birds and other scavengers like geese, ducks, chickens, pigs, whatever. Simple agricultural tools like shovels, rakes, and pitchforks were made of wood and only tipped with irons, much like the share or the coulter, because the vast majority of iron produced was monopolized by the upper classes, primarily for weapons and armor, and occasionally for building purposes. So you can kind of see it here. Here's the bill hook. Here's a pitchfork. Only the tines, the extreme end of the pitchfork might be of iron. The bill hook, only the cutting edge. And the shovel, again, it's hard to see with this thing, but it's all wood. And just this part, the cutting edge, would be made out of iron. Carts? Well, carts were the same two-wheeled version used by the ancient Romans. Why? Well, a two-wheeled cart is more easily turned and requires fewer draft animals to pull it than a four-wheeled wagon. Again, think of it, the pickup truck versus the semi-trailer. Keep in mind, the front wheels, like on a wagon of a car, they do not turn like the front wheels on a car. So it's far more difficult. You sort of have to go in a lengthy, long, roundabout way to turn it, unless you get a bunch of really strong people, or unload the wagon, and then physically lift it up and move it. Another key medieval invention, which occurs in the early Middle Ages, probably 6th, maybe 5th, 6th, 7th century, was the invention of the horseshoe, which allows horses to be used better also, not just in warfare, but as draft animals, but also especially the horse collar was invented, something the Greeks and Romans did not have. The horse collar, of course, if you don't know, will rest on the horse's shoulders, whereas before then, to pull a wagon or a cart among the Greeks and Romans, they would simply tie a rope around the horse's neck. So, of course, the weightier the wagon, the horse is essentially strangling to death while trying to pull the stuff. Again, you can see it a little bit better here. This, of course, is the scarecrow. Here's the horse pulling the harrow. Notice this shape is kind of weird. It does have a stone on it. Here is the sower sowing the seeds. And here are those damn annoying birds trying to eat the seed. The wrap-up quote. Harrow not your land too deep, but so that you may destroy the thistles and the weeds utterly. At sowing, plow not too large a furrow, but small ones close together, that the seed may fall evenly. When the land is sown, the harrow shall come and shall drive down the grain into the hollows between the two furrows, and the large and wide furrow shall be uncovered, so that none of the seed shall abide upon it. When the grain is come up above the ground, go to the one end of the furrow, lean down, and behold the grain along towards the other end, and you shall find this true. For the land is as much raised as you can, and see that the furrow which is in the midst between the two ridges is narrow, and that the ridge which lays as if it were a crest in that furrow is turned over when the plow is gone over it, then shall the furrow be narrow enough. The Book of the Seneschal, 1275. So, let me know what you think of this quote in the comments section below. Also, what you liked about this video, and what other historical topics or subjects you'd like to see in future videos. Be sure to click like, share, and especially subscribe, as it will help me bring you more great videos. And click on that little bell thingy so you'll know when the next History Waits for No One video is posted. If you want to know more, there are recommended studies on this topic in the description below, along with other ways to connect with me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the past.